this basic pyramid. So for those of you who I've already coached, what is the bottom, what's the most important skill in racing if you want to break it down to three like broad categories? Or first of all, let's go with what are the basic three broad categories of sailboat racing? Boat speed. So speed, tactics, and boat handling. So boat handling is tacks, jaws, mark grounding, starts, right? So out of those three, what would you say is the most important one?
Boat speed.
Boat speed, right? You can be the smartest guy, you can be the best tacker, but if you're not going fast, you're not going to beat anybody, right? So first, you start with speed, and then what's the next most important one? Boat handling, right? And then the last, which I'm going to split into two categories, is one Jasper already said, which is tactics. And then what would the other half of that be? Strategy. So what's the difference between strategy and tactics?
Strategy is like your own boat, and tactics is like your boat with other boats.
Speak up.
Strategy is like focusing on your own boat, where you want to go on the course. And tactics is like your boat with other boats.
Yeah, exactly. So strategy is sailing the course as if there's only wind, right? So you look up the course and you say, oh, I like the right side, it's a lot darker, the wind's been shifting right, I'm gonna sail and go to the right side, get in the pressure, go to the mark. That's strategy, is sailing as only wind, and then tactics is sailing for only boats. So even though the right side is really important, you see a lot of boats going left, so you want to go left, so you stay with the fleet and in front of boats. So today what the most important thing is going to be is speed, and what's the best way to slow your boat down in speed? It kind of comes to the second one.
I don't understand that question.
So, okay. So in order to slow your boat down the most is tacking, right? So the more tacks you do, the slower your boat goes, especially in this breeze. So today I want people to only really think about straight line speed. We're just going to be looking at going fast, sailing the boat flat with the right setup on the controls. So there's three controls on a laser, and these things have to change fluidly and all the time. There's two forces that act on a boat. There's the center of effort and then the center of lateral resistance. So if you look at a boat, we have the center of effort, which is sort of, if you put a finger on the sail, the place where the wind is most impactful on the sail, where there's the most force on the sail. And then the center of effort, kind of going to give myself enough room, is on, or the center of lateral resistance is on the dagger board, which is keeping you straight, right? So if you pull your sail in and have your dagger board all the way up, the only thing you're going to do is slide sideways. So in order to change the center of effort, when you put your vang on, it's going to move back a little bit, right? When you put your out haul on, so vang moves back, out haul, doesn't really change your center of effort, but it's going to make it deeper, right? So if this is our sail, that's really deep, that's really tight. That's sort of in the middle. It's going to change the power you have in the rig. And then Cunningham is going to do what to your center of effort?
Move it forward.
Move it forward and move it down, right? So the big thing that we're going to think about today is playing with our Cunningham and moving the center of effort down. And why would we want to move it down? Easier to hike, right? So if we look at the forces on our boat, if this is our boat, here's our sail. Has anyone ever used a crowbar before? Right? Is it easier to use a really big crowbar or a really small crowbar? Big crowbar, right? I don't know the exact, but if you have a really big lever, the amount of force that you're exacting on that one point is much more than if you have a really small lever. So think about your sail and the center of effort as a lever that's fighting against you, whereas if your center of effort, or the point where the deepest part of your sail is really high up, then you're hiking against a really big lever. That's like someone climbing up on the top of your mast and pulling your boat over and trying to flip you. If your center of effort's really far down here, then it's like just you hiking on. It's like someone on the other side of the hiking strap hiking on the other side of the boat trying to flip your boat over, right? It's much easier to hike against. So whenever you feel depowered, especially in a laser, first thing that you should really think about is putting on your Cunningham, right? And what that's going to do is that's going to move your center of effort down, make things a lot easier to hike against, and just make your boat a little bit more in control. Now, if we have a really deep sail, what does that mean? Power, right? So if we have a really deep sail, that means we have a lot of power, and it's going to be sort of hard to hike against if it's really deep and really heavy, because we're holding a lot of power in that sail. It's like there's a really big guy pushing on the top of your mast as opposed to a really small person, right? And then if we have a really slim sail where not so much outhaul, it's the opposite. Less power, where we have a littler guy kind of pushing on our boat, making it less powerful tipping force. So the way that I want you guys to think about power is there's light wind, medium wind, and heavy wind. In light wind, we're probably going to want to go sort of in the middle, not all the way out, not cranked all the way in, but sort of in the middle. And the reason for that is if in light wind, we have wind coming in like this, the wind has to reach the end of the sail, or the leech of the sail, the end of the outhaul at the exact same time, right? Just like an airplane wind. And on an airplane, has anyone ever been on an airplane here? Right, raise your hand. So, okay, when you look at an airplane, what do you notice when it takes off? What is the wing doing? It's really fat, right? The wing's really fat. And the reason for that is if we have our wing here, really fat like that, the wind comes and it has to do the same thing like a sail. It has to hit that exact point at the same time on both sides, right? So if it's really long on the top and sort of even on the bottom, then it's got to go much quicker around the outside, and that force that comes with speed pushes the wing down, lifts the plane up, right? The same thing kind of happens in light wind, right? If you have a really fat sail, but there's not enough power, right? We have these big thrusters on planes that push the plane really fast, have a lot of speed going through the wing, something like 400 miles an hour just to lift the plane up, right? If we're sailing at 8 knots, we're not going to do any of that, and we're just really stalling the breeze out. So if you want to think about how the wind comes into the sail, it kind of looks like this, where it goes quick, 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 and then once it gets to that deepest point, if it's really light breeze, it slows down. It gets stalled out in the sail, and then it kind of accelerates as it comes out, whereas we have sort of neutral, whatever the wind speed is outside of the boat, just going around the outside, right? So what this does in light wind is, because we have this red area in the sail where it stalls out, it's just going to push us sideways, right? We want our boats to go forward, not sideways. So the deeper our sail is in light breeze, it's going to stall out and push us sideways. So in light breeze, you want to kind of bring the outhaul in enough so that it doesn't get to that stalled area, right? So you want to just direct the wind so it goes through the sail and not stalling. So it looks something like that. And the way that Stu loves to explain it is as a blade, right? So we want to think of our sail as a blade where maybe a hand length, maybe half a hand length, if you put here's the boom, if you put your hand right on the boom, and then the foot of the sail, just a hand length between the foot of the sail and the boom.
At the cleat.
At the cleat, yeah, in the middle of the boom. In the middle of the boom at the deepest point of the sail.
Another measurement would be 5 to 6 inches there, light, medium.
So once we have this set up, and this breeze, we're probably going to want to be right in that middle, maybe in between all the way out and all the way in kind of blade conditions. And the reason for that being is we have a little bit more power, so it's going to push past that stalled out zone, and it's going to keep our sails powered up and our boat moving forward, right? So once we get that sweet spot where I would recommend you guys go out and just try sailing upwind with your sails or with your outhaul all the way out and then all the way in, and then go all the way in and then ease it out just until you feel the boat kind of go forward. When it's all the way out, you're going to feel that stalled out area where the boat's just going to kind of feel like it's sliding sideways. And when it's all the way in, you're really not going to be moving too fast because it's going to feel like it's stalled, again, just moving sideways. So if we look at it where it's all the way in, just draw that up here. It sort of hits it like a wall where it comes in, bounces out, comes in, bounces out, right? So it's just pushing on the sail, pushing us sideways as opposed to directing the wind and pushing it forward. With the Cunningham, my rule of thumb whenever I sail with my boat is I like to take all the wrinkles out in the sail, right? So if you look at your sail, when you first get out there and you have no Cunningham on, you'll see a bunch of wrinkles kind of coming off the mast like this. All these horizontal wrinkles, right? That's the sleeve of your sail kind of bunching up because the wind's pushing on the sail, moving the sailcloth up, and that makes everything really wrinkled, disturbs airflow, and really makes the sail fairly deep, right? And if we want to talk about center of effort, then it's going to kind of just be higher up, right? Because now we're pushing the sailcloth up, the whole sail is being pushed up, and we're hiking against a really high lever, right? So for outhaul, I like to take all my wrinkles out first and then see how I'm going. I like to hike as hard as I can, just go full race speed mode with just the wrinkles out, and then I go tighter if I need to hike more, tighter, 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 until I feel that I can hold the boat down and I'm not fighting against something where anytime a puff comes, the boat just tips right over and I slide.
For the newer, the kids, this is not enough Cunningham. One hand kind of casually, it's two hands with your feet against the forward part of the cockpit and killing yourself to pull it if you get overpowered. I see too many, and the same with you're going to do the Vang. The same with the Vang, it's 15 to 1, but I try to break my Vang when it's ripping. It is so depowering.
Yeah.
The message is, this, beat those poor sails, because it really makes a difference.
Yeah, and then just another note on the Cunningham, for heavy breeze, like if it's white capping 13 knots and you're in what we call survival mode, where you're feeling like you're gonna flip at any point, what I will do is I will put both my feet on the cockpit, on the front part of the cockpit, and just lean back with all my weight and crank on the Cunningham as tight as possible. And that's in just nuking conditions, survival conditions, just to depower as much as possible. I've busted a block a couple times doing that, but again, it's just all about keeping your boat in control. So why do you want to keep your boat in control, which I'll get to after I go through Vang. But Vang is a really, really important tool in a laser. And why is it an important tool in a laser? Can anybody tell me why? What's different from a laser versus, say, a 420 or a J22?
Mast bends a lot.
The mast bends. And why does the mast bend?
Because you're tightening the lead. Unsafe. Mast down.
The Vang.
We don't have shrouds, right? So shrouds and spreaders and a forestay keep the mast going, pulling forward, doesn't bend as much, it's a different mast. We have two pieces in a laser mast, so we got a really, really bendy mast. And what that does is it changes our center of effort forward and back, right? So if our center of effort is back, here's our boat, here's our sail. If we have a lot of force pushing on the back of the boat, right? What happens if, let's say, someone pushes on your stern? What's the boat gonna want to do? It's gonna head up, right? So if we have a really far back center of effort, it's gonna head the boat up. And the way we get that is we put a lot of vang on. If we have no vang on at all, then it moves our center of effort really far forward. And it's, someone pushes on the, oh, thank you, Steve. So if someone pushes on the front of the sail, then the boat's gonna head down. If someone pushes on the back of the sail, the boat's gonna wanna head up. So we're trying to find this fine line with all three controls where we have the power at the right perfect Goldilocks standard, you could say, where it's not gonna get stalled out, it's not gonna be overpowered where it's pushing you sideways. We want the Cunningham moving the center of effort down so we're not hiking against some guy pushing at the top of the sail. And we want the vang situated so our boat heads up a little bit. So we put on a little bit of vang about what I call block to block, and I'll go over that in a second. And that just moves the center of effort back enough so that whenever we sail, it's gonna push the bow up as opposed to throwing the bow down. So block to block, what is block to block? Everyone knows what block to block is?
Block on the traveler.
Exactly, right? So it's the block on your boom and the block on the traveler touching is block to block. So a good rule of thumb to start with at any point is to mark your vang where block to block is. So on my vang, I'll have a boom, mast, and then my vang kind of coming like this with a bunch of strings, right? On the bottom string, I'll put markings, whether it's a grease marker, whether it's a piece of tape, and I'll pull my main sheet into block to block, pull my vang just so it's slack, right? I'm not putting any more vang on, and just so that it's the ropes are tight, and I mark where my block is on that line, right? So if you look at my vang, which you can come by and see, I think I only have one marking on there right now, but it's block to block, and that is the most important marking because when you start, you want your vang at block to block. And the reason for that is it moves the center of effort back just enough so that it heads your boat up. And we all know we want to point at a start because if we don't point, we're going to fall right down into the guy to leeward of us and we're not going to be able to get off the starting line at all. So it's not good to guess where that block to block vang setting is. So I like to mark that just so I know exactly where it is, pull it on, move the center of effort back, have the boat lift up and point a little bit more. So I have a couple markings. One is block to block. The next is a light reach. So if we do reaching, or if you're reaching, it's just a little bit, it's probably an inch out from block to block. And then I have survival conditions, which is just max vang on as tight as you possibly can, which is probably down here. And then I have just what I call creeping. And Stu and I will go over creeping in a second. So these vang settings are extremely important, and I cannot stress enough marking your controls. So if you can all come over and look at my boat before we go out, and I have outhaul settings and vang settings. Cunningham is sort of fluid and it changes, so you can't necessarily set it and forget it because that's changing all day, right? For example, today every time I go into a lull, I'll be taking Cunningham off. Every time I go into a puff, I'll be pulling Cunningham on. But for vang and outhaul, you can pretty much set those and forget those, right? If it's really, really heavy, you're putting on your vang. And if it's really light, you're taking off your vang. But your outhaul sort of sets and stays the entire upwind, and then once you round that windward mark, you take your outhaul off, deepen the sail to get a lot of power going downwind, which we'll get into. So next, we'll talk about starts, and that will be it for this chat, and then we'll hit the water. So starts are the most important part of your race. You can win your race or you can lose your race at the start. If you have a bad start and you're immediately behind everybody, it's a lot harder to catch up as opposed to having a really great start and then slowly losing one boat after another, one boat after another. So the way we get good starts is first knowing where the line is. Does anybody know how to check and see where they are on the line?
Head to wind and see which side of the line is further forward. Head to wind in the line and see which the fin of the boat is further forward.
Okay, so that's one method. Any other methods? Line sights, right? Any other methods? So there's a bunch of different methods, and the most popular is one, going head to wind and seeing which way your bow goes, two, line sights, and then one that I like to use is I point my hand directly at the pin and directly at the boat, and the angle that my arm makes tells me how close I am to the line, right? If I'm 180 degrees, I'm right on the line. If I'm less than that, I'm below the line, and if I'm pointing back on each time, I'm over the line. You can do that with your eyes, just looking at the pin, looking at the boat, seeing kind of like guessing the angle that you're making, if, you know, going like that with your eyes. The other way you can do it is point your bow at the pin, and this is, I can't remember the sailor who did it, but point your bow at the pin, and then you just look underneath, right through the tiller extension, right? So your tiller extension's straight on the boat, and if you point your bow and then keep your tiller extension straight, stand up and look underneath your legs at the tiller extension and see if it points at the boat, you're on the line. If it points off the boat, you're under the line, and if it points over the boat, you're over the line, right? So for those of you guys who don't know, the way that Steven does it is by having the line here. We'll make it a little favor, and you put your bow head to wind, and whatever way, say the wind's coming this way, whatever way your bow drifts, so if this is your boat, whatever way your bow drifts with the directly head to wind is going to be the favored end of the line, right? So if the breeze is coming from here and your bow goes that way, that means that the boat's going to be favored. If the breeze is coming from here and your bow goes that way, the pin's favored, right? The next most important way to check the line is what we call line sights. Does anybody know what a line sight is?
So line sights are where you go to the boat in the middle and the pin, and you look across and say like there's a tree, right? If you're at the pin, there's a tree that lines up with the line. You go to the boat, there's like a lobster pot, then you go to the middle, and you can see which, and there's like another tree or something, and then you can go above and find a line sight. For if you're above the line, you can go for below, and if you have a line sight for below the line, and depending on where you see those sights, like on the land or on the water, that's you can tell if you're over, above, or on the line.
Yeah, so that's great, but I have a little bit of a different method that I like to do my line sights, and this gives me a little bit more of an accurate reading. So the way I do it is we have our boat. This is our committee boat here. Flag, pin here, and then the land or whatever mass it could be. It could be an island. I've used large channel markers before. It could be a buoy. It could be a hill, right? But what you can't use is a cloud, a boat, right? Because those move, right? So you have to have something that's very stable, that's not going to change, that you can look at and have an accurate reading every time. So the way I do it is I set my bow right as close to the engine of the committee boat as possible. And then I let myself drift back a boat length or 2 boat lengths. Call it 2 boat lengths just for easy math, right? So I like to let my boat drift back 2 boat lengths, and then I take my line sight. I look from where my boat is through the pin at whatever is on land. So let's say it's a red pine tree, right? I take my sight, look up, and I see a red pine tree directly in line with the pin. Next, I'll go up and I'll go right next to the boat. And I'll look, make sure I'm directly in line with the flag or where they're judging the line from. Look directly through the pin and then find whatever is stable. Maybe, let's say it's a house, okay? Not a bad house. So I'll look there, and I see a house. And then I take one more, so my 3rd line sight, and I just go over the line. I like to go a boat length over the line, just sort of anywhere over the line so that whenever I look and I see that lined up with a pin, I know I'm over the line. So I'll go a boat length over the line, look down, let's say it's a big rock or something, right? So then I look down and I see I have a rock. So when I look at this house and I'm directly in line with the house, I know that my body is exactly on the line. But what's wrong with that statement?
If the bow is gonna be behind the line.
The bow is going to be over the line, right? If
Right.
I'm on the line, my body's over on the line, I've got like 5-10 feet of bow that's over the line, right? So line sights, the way Emma described them, are great, but it's kind of hard to judge because you got to guess it, and then hopefully you're going to guess right that you're going to be at your line sight at go where your bow's not going to be over. And a lot of people have a hard time judging that, so they fall back or they go over. A lot of times they're going to be over the line. So the way I like to do it is I forget about these 3 lines for a little bit. This one is just to tell myself I'm over, get back. This one is, this bottom one is, oh, I'm really over, get back. And this is the one that I'm looking at the most. So the pine tree one is the one I'm looking at the most. So for all you math people out there, forgive me. But the way I like to think about it is with the law of similar triangles, right? So if I go in the middle and this line of the triangle is 2 boat lengths long, if I go directly in the middle of the line, then I know that my bow is here. I'm going to be exactly 1 boat length, right, underneath the line. If I'm at the boat, I'm going to be 2 boat lengths under. If I'm at the middle, I'm going to be a boat length under. If I'm a quarter way down the line, how far would I be under?
1.5.
Boat length and a half, right? So 1 boat length, 1.5 boat lengths, and then if I'm 3/4 of the way down the line, half a boat length, right? So in starts, do you want to just pull in your sail when the go whistle happens? When the start hits go, do you want to pull in your sail or do you want to pull it in beforehand? Beforehand, right? But if you don't know where you are on the line and you pull it in beforehand, there's a good chance you're going to be over. So this marking is really important. It gives you about a boat length of space to for sure say that I'm a boat length underneath the line. If I pull in my sail at 5 seconds, and I sail a boat length in 5 seconds, then I can pull my sail in at 5 seconds. If it's windier like today and you travel a boat length in 3 seconds, you're probably going to want to pull your sail in at 3 seconds, right? If it's super, super, super windy and you just go boat length in a second, then you're probably going to want to pull your sail in at 1 second and you'll travel a boat length in 1 second. So the first thing to this setup is practicing time and distance, right? Try to go up next to a lobster pod, a mooring ball, the committee boat, whatever's stationary. Stop your boat, trim in your sail, and then time yourself to see how long it takes you to go 1 boat length away from that stationary object, right? So I pull my sail, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's a boat length. If you want to get into a little bit more, you can go 2 boat lengths and then judge it from there. But the idea is just to know how fast you're going to travel with the current wind speed that you're at. So if you have 1 boat length below the line and it takes 5 seconds, you're going to want to start your acceleration at 5 seconds and make sure that you're lined up with that pine tree. And then at go, this is why we do a bunch of races, which is helpful, is at go, check in with that line sight with the house. See if you're a little bit below it, see if you're right on it, and if you're right on it, then that's probably great. If you're a little bit tiny below, that's better because your bow is directly on the line, right? But you're trying to match yourself so that you sail 1 boat length, bow directly on the line.
Can I point out 2 things? One is you're crowding the line, which you all tend to do. You stop your boat going head to wind, right? You have to because you'll go over. What happens when any boat is head to wind and you're trying to get going again? It slides downwind into the boat below you instantly. So you've got to have the center of the blades engaged, which means you've got to have forward motion, which is this concept of creeping. Once you stop dead, you're just going to slide right into the boat below you. I already forgot the second thing.
Well, I can add it to that. So Sue brings up a great point where a lot of people get stuck in irons, right? And what's the best way to get out of irons?
Bear off.
Bear off, okay.
Release the bang.
What if you bear off, but you come right back into irons, right? You just said it, but I spoke before you said it, which is let the vang off, right? We know if we put the vang on, it moves the center of effort back, and if we have something pushing on the back of our boat, it brings the bow forward. So if it's really windy and you're just stuck in irons and you put the tiller one way and then you trim back in and you go right back into irons, take off your vang and let the power of the center of effort go forward in the sail, which will bring your bow down, right?
I remembered my thing.
Right?
So this is all hunky-dory when there's 5 or 6 or 8 boats, right? When there's 50 boats on this line, total chaos, sails luffing, total chaos, and you're all hyped up for the, you know, this is what I go through. You're hardly even thinking about that. So Anna Tunacliffe, who's pretty good in this class, she, in some of her coaching, talked about you got to have eyes in the back of your head, and you can't let the boat above you. You can't let the boat above you get bow on bowed. You gotta always be thinking, I gotta have my bow poked, and you actually can start hearing bow waves, and you can start sensing it. It takes a long time, but she just had it. She was never not going to be, depending on the conditions, you know, a foot to like 4 or 5 feet, not bow out on both the starts are a 3-boat race, right? Starts are a 3-boat race, and she just made damn sure that she wasn't ever not poked just a hair.
Why don't you explain what that means, 3-boat race?
3-boat race, you've got the boat below you trying to come up and do a lee bow, and you've got somebody, hopefully there's nobody up. This is a disaster. The windward boat there's nobody for like 3 or 4 boat lengths, and they come reaching down full speed, riding right on the sight line. You're dead. You're dead meat. So, you know, in that case, because lasers tack quickly, maybe you sense that and you quickly tack and go get under him. But that's probably too advanced.
And I will just add to Stu's comment is, even if there are many boats, right? How many times have you thought 100% you're on the line and then you're 10 boat lengths under, right? Everyone's had that happen, right? You're like, I'm on the line, I've got it, I'm gonna win this race, I'm gonna win this start, and then your coach or your committee boat's like, okay, first boat on the line now, 20 seconds after the race has started, right? So it's always good to be in front and bow forward, right? Bow forward is a really powerful move, and that just looks like this, where if the wind's coming from here, here's the one boat, here's your boat, just bow forward, right? So if you look, you should be able to see kind of a diagonal line with all the bows going. If they're all horizontally matched up like that, then this guy is underneath the top guy, right? And then one quick story is using line sights. I sailed in an 80 boat fleet, and I used a line sight, and for whatever reason, I don't know why the other guys weren't using line sights, but this just goes to show you, it was at a North American Championships, and like former Olympians, top sailors were all there, and you'd think they'd all use line sights, and I had a really good line sight. I knew exactly where I was, and it was right off like a pier in California, and I set up in front of all 3 of like the top sailors in that fleet. Right bow, their bow was right behind my stern. I was in front of them. They were all yelling at me that I was over, but I had my line sight. I knew exactly where I was, and that was right in the middle of the line in the 80 boat fleet where there's a considerable amount of line sag. I just trimmed in, and I had the best start of that race, right? So line sights are really useful until they're not. They're useful if you can see that everyone's really far below, and they're not if you're kind of crowded by everyone. And in that regard, just be bow forward. You don't want to be the guy who thinks he's on the line behind everybody, and then they just send the race off and you're behind everybody. It's better to be over the line with every single person than to be the one guy who was like, I was on the line, but you were 3rd row, right? So that's pretty much it for today. So today I just want to see a lot of like controls, as in Cunningham, nice and depowered so your boat's controlled, out haul so it's tight enough where you're not sliding your boat sideways where it feels like you're stalled out in that wind zone, so not too deep, and then Cunningham, block to block, and then the tighter that, the more you need to depower, the tighter Cunningham comes down. And then for starts, you can play around with this line sight and then just being bow forward of every single person. And one quick thing on starts is you want to always try to set up, depends on the size of the fleet, but you always want to try to set up where you want to start. If it's 3 minutes, inside a minute. If it's a really, really small fleet, that might turn into something more like 30 seconds, 45 seconds. But you still want to just be set up on the line. You don't want to become crashing in at the last second and do a late boat start, right? Because when you get to a fleet where there's 100 or 50 or 30 boats on a line, that's not going to happen. There's going to be 10 other people trying to do the exact same thing as you, and they're just going to shut you out immediately. Any questions? Great. All right. Let's hit the water.
Well, actually, let's take a couple of minutes and talk about how we're gonna run